Alright guys, so in this video we're going to be talking about the best way to take ashwagandha in order to maximize results. So let's dive right in. Hey guys, my name is Zach Allison and welcome to Nutrition Library, your trusted resource for an evidence-based approach to supplementation. If you haven't already or you are new to the channel, I would definitely recommend hitting that red subscribe button that's below this video so that you can stay up to date with all of our future content. Thank you so much. So we're going to break this video down into four primary parts. The first being when to take ashwagandha. The second being how long to take it. The third thing we're going to talk about is other compounds that you can actually take with ashwagandha and while you're cycling off of it. And then the fourth thing that we're going to get into is how to maximize absorption. So again, the first thing we're going to talk about in this video is when to take ashwagandha. And the truth is there really isn't a best time to take ashwagandha. It really just depends on your own personal biochemistry. And unfortunately, we just don't have a ton of research that's available at the moment on when the best time to take it might be. And because it has so many active ingredients, and the active ingredients that are in ashwagandha do several different things. Some of them are stimulating, some of them are more sedating and relaxing. And so it kind of presents a tad bit of an issue when it comes to trying to pin down and nail down a perfect time to take it. Now, the two primary ways of taking ashwagandha are either one in a split dose throughout the day or two in a single dose throughout the day. Now, ashwagandha has a relatively short half-life of around 2 to 4 hours. Now, because it has a half-life of roughly 2 to 4 hours, this essentially means that after about 12 hours, that 95% of the active ingredients of ashwagandha are typically out of your system by then. Now, with the understanding that ashwagandha's half-life is around 2 to 4 hours and is excreted, 95% of it is excreted after 12 hours, the optimal dosing period is going to be taking it every 12 hours. Now, for most people, this means taking a dose in the morning and then also taking another dose in the evening time, and essentially splitting the daily amount that you're aiming for across those two doses. Now, by doing this, you are going to get the most consistent intake of ashwagandha and reap the most benefits from it. However, the downside to this is obviously that you're having to keep up with making sure whether or not you actually took your morning dose and your evening dose. So for those of you that are very, very simple and like to take all of your supplements or whatever it might be in one single dose, this may not be the best route for you. But for those of you that are trying to maximize the effects of ashwagandha, this is definitely going to be the route that you want to take. So now the alternative to taking a split dose in the morning and in the evening time is obviously going to be just simply taking it once per day. And now I actually kind of veer from some of the conventional wisdom when it comes down to one particular time of day to take ashwagandha. A lot of people will actually tell you to either one, take it right when you wake up in the morning because that's when cortisol is naturally highest. And one of the things that ashwagandha is primarily used for is to reduce cortisol. And then the other way that people typically recommend that you take it is by simply taking it in the evening time before you go to sleep in order to aid in sleep quality. I actually don't like either of those options because ashwagandha again does have stimulating and relaxing properties to it, and so by taking it in the evening time you do run the risk of it keeping you up and kind of disrupting your sleep patterns to some degree. And by taking it in the morning you can actually kind of cause too much relaxation if you're taking your entire dose in the morning time. And because of this, I'm a huge fan of taking your single dose in the afternoon time with lunch. And this essentially ensures that you're not going to disrupt your sleep patterns or cause too much relaxation in the morning time, and kind of finds a happy medium between those two in order to reap the full benefits while also minimizing the side effects. Now, one of the huge questions that I get almost on a weekly basis is how long can I take ashwagandha? And this is a very legitimate question because ashwagandha is like a lot of compounds in that it actually loses its effectiveness at a specific dose if you continue to take it indefinitely, which is why it's traditionally recommended that you cycle your ashwagandha intake. And what is traditionally recommended is what I would call a macro cycle. And that's simply just a fancy term that I like to personally use in order to delineate between the two types of cycles that you can do. And so again, the first way that you can cycle your ashwagandha intake is through a macro cycle, which would simply just be a 2 to 3 month period where you take it every single day, followed by a period of roughly 1 to 2 months after that where you completely abstain from taking it. Now, the benefit to this is obviously that while you're in that 3-month on period, you're able to pretty much take it every single day without having to wake up and wonder and think about and keep up with, well, did I take it yesterday? Do I need to take it today? And so it makes it a whole lot easier, especially for individuals that are just getting into herbal supplementation and don't want to think about these things. But the downside, however, is obviously that after that 3-month period that you do need to go through a 1 to 2 month period where you're not consuming it in order to prevent your body from developing a tolerance to the compounds that are in ashwagandha. And this is why I'm actually a bigger fan of doing what I call microcycles, which is where you take ashwagandha for 1 to 5 days, followed by a period where you do abstain from taking it. That is right around half to equal the amount of time that you were taking it. So for instance, if you want to do an on cycle of about 3 days, that would mean that you would take it for 3 days, whether that be in the morning and in the evening time, or just in one dose in the afternoon. And so you would take it for about 3 days, followed by a period of 1 to 3 days where you don't take it. And I am a huge fan of this for two primary reasons. One is that it prevents your body from developing a tolerance to the compounds that are in ashwagandha. And the second reason is that it actually allows you to take it indefinitely because of that. And this is essentially what tolerance is at the end of the day. So tolerance is essentially when your body begins to adapt to the intake of specific compounds in such a way that those compounds then become less and severely less effective at doing what you were consuming them to do. Now, there are 3 primary ways that your body does this. One is by simply upregulating the enzymes that your body uses in order to break down the compounds that you're ingesting. So there are very specific enzymes that your body uses in order to break ashwagandha down. And this actually goes across the board for almost any compound that you're consuming, and really any pharmaceutical for that matter as well. And so your body upregulates the enzymes that are required to break that compound down, which means that your body's actually able to excrete it at a higher rate. Now, the second way that your body adapts to the consistent intake of specific compounds is that it actually withdraws the receptors that are on cells that respond to those compounds. It withdraws those into the cell in order to make the cells less responsive and less sensitive to that compound. And it makes sense if you think about it, because your body is always trying to get to a state of homeostasis. And so if you are throwing something into your body that is drastically increasing neurotransmitter output or directly binding to the receptors on specific cells, your body essentially doesn't want that to happen on a consistent basis. And so in order to remain at a state of homeostasis, it will actually begin to pull those receptors into the cell so that it's not as responsive to those compounds. Now, the third way that your body develops tolerance is actually downstream of that. So once those receptors that are on cells withdraw into the cell, After a prolonged period of doing that, they will actually begin to lose their protein content. And once they lose their protein content, they actually essentially die. And so you lose receptor density to specific hormones and neurotransmitters. Now, the third thing we want to talk about when it comes to how best to take ashwagandha is that we want to talk about other compounds that we can actually cycle with ashwagandha while we're on an off period. So for instance, if you are taking ashwagandha for stress and maybe even anxiety to some degree, and you're choosing, for instance, to do a 5-day cycle on with a 3-day cycle off, there are other compounds that you can actually use while you're on your off period to reap the benefits of ashwagandha while you're taking it, but then also to treat that level of stress that you're trying to treat with other compounds when you're not taking the ashwagandha. So a great example of this would be something like L-theanine. Now, if you guys haven't seen my video on L-theanine yet, I'll link it at the end of this video. But suffice it to say that L-theanine is also very effective at treating stress. And so if you're taking ashwagandha primarily to treat the symptoms of stress during that 5-day on period, you can take something like theanine on the off period in order to reap the benefits of both compounds while also not developing a tolerance to either of them. Now, another great example of this would be if you are taking ashwagandha in order to increase testosterone levels. Ashwagandha does have a slight effect and slight increasing effect on testosterone. And so if you're taking it for those purposes, but you also want to reap the benefits of increased testosterone while you're on your off period, compounds like forskolin and mucuna pruriens and even things like tungcat ali are great options to take while you're on your off period in order to reap the benefits of all of those compounds without, again, developing a tolerance to any of them. All right, so the last thing we want to talk about before we close out this video is how to maximize absorption. Now, the first thing you want to think about when you're trying to maximize the absorption of ashwagandha is that most of the compounds and most of the active compounds that are in ashwagandha are fat soluble. And this is why it's typically recommended that ashwagandha is consumed in a traditional format with milk and honey. And that's because milk is a fairly good source of fat. And so when you mix the ashwagandha with the milk and then the honey for taste, it one provides a tasty treat to some degree, but it also provides a chaperone for that ashwagandha to be absorbed through the gut lining. Now, I will say that it's important to note here that if you're consuming an extract like KSM-66 or Sensoril, it really doesn't matter if you're taking it with a fat source because those extracts have already used an ethanol extraction process in order to get the active ingredients and kind of activate them, so to speak, already. So when you consume an extract, it's really easy for your body to absorb those through the gut lining. And so again, you really don't have to worry about taking it with a fat source. Now, if you are consuming the root powder, you do need to consume it with a fat source because the root powder has not gone through the extraction process, which means that you need something that those compounds can dissolve into, like that fat, in order to be absorbed through the gut lining. But other than that, guys, that's all I have for you today. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you guys can implement this in your life, not just with ashwagandha, but also other compounds that you're consuming on a regular basis in order to maximize their effectiveness across the board. So if you guys have any questions or any comments about anything that was stated in this video, as always, simply leave a comment down below and I will get back to you as soon as possible. But if not, I will see you next time. Thank you so much.